Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll get the meeting started here. It is 8:30, so if you could find your way to your seats there. Welcome to the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. My name is Brian, and I am an alcoholic. This is a one-hour speaker meeting that meets every Saturday at St. Paul's Lutheran Church, 301 North Main Street in Doylestown, PA. The food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock, and the speaker comes on at 8:30. Feel free to show up and join us early. The business meeting for this group meets every Saturday, 7 p.m. to 7:30. The purpose of this group is to provide a consistent message of hope and recovery through God reliance and service to others through the practice and teachings of the 12 steps. We record all speakers so that others may benefit from their message of recovery. If you wish not to be recorded, simply ask. This is an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. If there are any newcomers or visitors from out of town that would like to introduce themselves on a first name basis so we can welcome you. Yes.
I'm Mike and I'm an alcoholic.
Mike, welcome. Scott.
I've been here for years.
Welcome. Sean.
Vincent, I'm an alcoholic.
Vincent, welcome.
My name's David, I'm an alcoholic.
David, welcome. Yeah.
Tim, alcoholic.
Tim.
Devin, alcoholic.
Devin.
No alcoholic.
Noah.
I'm not an alcoholic.
Evan. Rodrigo. Mike. We get everybody. Nice. A lot of newcomers here. Well, welcome everybody. The Conscious Contact Speaker Group encourages sponsorship. Would anyone with a working knowledge of the 12 steps and that is willing to sponsor raise their hands? So we got a lot of new guys. You can look around the room, maybe grab one of those people after the meeting, and hopefully we can help you get into the solution a little bit. There's always a meeting after the meeting. We'll all be hanging out here. Are there any announcements for the good of AA from the floor? Nothing from the floor, okay. A couple quick announcements from this group. This group has a sister group, which is a big book study group. It meets right up the road here, Thursday at 7:30 at Salem UCC Church, Court Street in Doylestown. The coffee's on at 6:15. Again, feel free to show up early, join us, help out with some service work. We have meeting lists and big books on easy terms. Please see me or any home group member after the meeting. If you cannot afford a big book, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group will give you one at no charge. Anyone that's willing to make donations for the purchase of big books and CDs to help those who cannot afford them can put their donations in the jar on the back table marked big book and CD donations. Any CDs of speakers past or present are available free of charge. Again, you can see me or any home group member after the meeting. This group has a YouTube channel, the Conscious Contact Speaker Group of Doylestown. It also has a Facebook page where we post happenings for this group, upcoming events, speakers, good resource to stay informed with happenings for this group. All groups around the area kind of post stuff, so it's a good resource to have to stay informed. We have hoodies for sale. We don't have them up, displayed here tonight, but we have hoodies for the group. There's a special going on tonight for April Fool's Day. If you make a $22 donation, you get a hoodie for free. So, yeah. With that, we're going to have Jason come up here. He's going to read the AA preamble. Just read it.
Jason, alcoholic. Just for today, prayer of recovery. Just for today, I will be agreeable. I will look as well as I can, dress becomingly, talk low, act courteously, criticize not one bit, not find fault with anything, and not try to improve or regulate anybody except myself. And now we'd like to bring up Alyssa.
Hi, I'm Alyssa. I'm an alcoholic. The AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution. Does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Her primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. Michelle's going to read the 12 steps.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle and I'm an alcoholic. The AA 12 Steps of Recovery. Step 1, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 2, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. Step 5, admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove these defects of character. Step 7, humbly asked Him to remove our shortcomings. Step 8, made a list of all persons we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, made direct amends wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. Step 10, continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Step 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out. Step 12, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. And now I'd like to turn the meeting back over to Brian.
Okay, 7th tradition, every AA group ought to be fully self-supporting, declining outside contributions. There are no dues or fees for AA membership, but we do have expenses. Any contributions you can afford to give help us to cover costs associated with the group, rent, big books, CDs, events, workshops, refreshments, so greatly appreciated. There's absolutely no smoking on the church property. That's as requested by the church, not our rule. Very blessed to be able to use this beautiful facility to have our meeting in, and really they just request that we keep the premise clean. So if you could just be considerate of that as you're coming and going from the meeting. Please take a moment to silence all cell phones and limit movement during the meeting to avoid distractions. And now to introduce our speaker for tonight, a good friend of the Conscious Contact Speaker Group, on loan to us from the Serenity in the Sand Group of Bradley Beach, New Jersey. Please help me welcome Tim D.
Hey everybody, Tim Alcoholic. So sober through AA and the grace of God since 11/1/11, and I'm excited to be here with you all. I want to thank Ron for inviting me, it's kind of strange being in this setting right now because my fiance and I on the way here on 195 had a tornado touchdown right next to us. And it was like crazy whipping wind, hail, like flooding, like instantly, and it was like instantly dark. So normally, like I've been in some heavy rain before, and you kind of slow down, put your hazards on. Everybody just immediately had to pull over because you couldn't see anything. So that's what happened right before we got here. So hey, everybody. So I'll get started. So my first drink, as the story goes, is I was a baby, and my dad took a bottle of beer and went to give me a little sip, and I latched onto it with my arms and my legs as my mom freaked out, and he had to like wrestle it away from me. I was also born on June 10th of that year, which is AA's birthday. And the only prayer I ever learned as a kid was the Lord's Prayer. So I know that some people, maybe started out as a cucumber, but I think I arrived in clearly packaged pickle jar. And, but, fast forward to the first drink that I remember mostly. I had been invited by some friends to drink, and I didn't really know what that meant exactly. I had seen my dad have a beer with dinner. I didn't really understand why people drank. I didn't understand the point of it. And so we showed up at my friend's house, and there's 3 of us. And so they line up 3 glasses, pour a little bit of Southern Comfort in each one. And so we all swig it back, and, both my friends were like, like burning or whatever. I took the bottle and filled my glass to the top, and then grabbed another glass out of the cabinet, filled it to the top with Coca-Cola, and then I started chasing. Mind you, I've never seen this happen. I just kind of like reinvented chasing in the moment. I was like, if this tastes bad, let's wash it down with something that tastes better. And I did that. My friends were like cheering me on because I was like this, like shy, quiet kid, and I'm like just going for it. And so I did that night until I don't remember. And when I woke up the next morning, I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was, but I just could not wait to do that again. And so I proceeded to just start drinking pretty much all the time. And I moved down to my parents' basement, and I started drinking champagne every morning before school because there was a bunch of champagne bottles that they had been given over the years, so it's just like what was available. So I started drinking that before, high school every morning. And I didn't really know at the time that there was anything different about me. I just knew that I loved it. And one of the things that I've learned, like coming into AA is that, because I think for a long time, I knew that I was an alcoholic. As the years went by, I had pretty much accepted to that. If I was surrendered at all, it was only one thing, and I knew I was an alcoholic. Everybody in my life seemed to also know it. And, I didn't really know that I had, like I said, that I was different. And so coming into AA, I learned that I have this thing called physical allergy, which is essentially that I put a drink in my body, and what happens to me is I get hungrier for more, right? And that hunger really doesn't stop, so it's like, and, I call it a hunger rather than a thirst, because I'm drinking, right? But, I don't think that most people ever really get to the point where they're, truly thirsty, where they're like, oh my God, I'm, dying of thirst. But I think people understand the feeling of being hungry on a regular basis, or, if you let it get to a certain point, hangry, right? And, as I kind of got worse and worse in my alcoholism, hangry was kind of my default state, and alcoholism was the only thing that fixed that. It was the only thing that would satisfy my appetite. And so it's kind of strange because, with a lot of other things, you give someone something and then they become satisfied at some point. It's like, okay, you give me a Chipotle burrito and then I'm like, oh, that was great. Give me 5 more. It's like, I don't get full. I just want more and more and more. And so the physical allergy, it's an abnormal reaction, right? I know a lot of normies, and they don't react that way to alcohol. They'll have half a glass of wine with dinner, and they're like, oh, it's pretty good, it's nice, I'm like, what are you doing? You're doing it wrong, And I think part of what it is that for me, it is such a transformative night and day experience. Because growing up, I had always kind of felt like I was in this rowboat trying to catch up to the cruise ship of life. Everybody else is having a great time, they're up on the cruise ship, and I'm down at ocean level, struggling, how do I get up there? And when I had that first drink, I felt all of a sudden like I was on the cruise ship. We talk about that feeling of I've arrived, right? And so, to me, I had this sense very early on in my drinking, and I was like, why would you ever not want to feel like this? Why would you ever not want to be, I just couldn't understand why people weren't drunk all day, every day. Because for me, that's how I wanted to feel all the time. And so I really proceeded to live my life in a way where I could be drunk as much as possible. All day, every day. I never not wanted to feel that way, And the other thing I didn't really understand is that I had this thing called a mental obsession, this subtle insanity where at some point or another, circumstances cause me to stop. It's like I don't really decide to stop. It's like circumstances just kind of get in the way, and I run out or I run into some major problems, and at some point or another, I do stop my drinking. But what happens is it's like I have all these consequences. And it's as if I was, on a ship in the middle of the ocean, just sank the ship in a storm that I created, and I wash up on the shore, bloody, almost drowned, gasping for air, and I struggle to my feet, and I jump directly back in the ocean. And so I think that sometimes when people talk about the insanity, they think, oh yeah, I did crazy stuff when I drank. That's not really what we're talking about when we talk about the subtle insanity, right? What we're talking about is I stop and I have all this wreckage behind me and all these consequences behind me that just happened, and none of them come to mind. And even if they do come to mind, that parallel with my sound reasoning, there inevitably runs some trivial excuse for taking the first drink, right? And for me, most of the time what that looked like was, yeah, but I feel like it. Yeah, but I feel like it would win out over, you just went to jail, no one's talking to you, you have nowhere to live. Yeah, but wouldn't it be nice to just have one? And then I do, right? And then I just keep paying these consequences. And one of the reasons why I think that I'm willing to pay such a high price to continue to have this experience, even though it's causing me so much trouble, is because of what it does for me, right? I felt this kind of pit of angst, anxiety, depression, loneliness, feelings of separateness, not being a part of. And when I would drink, that pit would be like magic. And that's why I wanted to feel that way all the time, because you take the drink away and then I have no solution to that pit in my chest that I feel all the time. And so because this is such a transformative experience for me, because it's just this beyond incredible experience, I'm willing to continue to pay such a high price in order to continue to have that. I'm willing to basically lose everything worthwhile in life to continue to have that experience. And then I didn't realize that there was this third component, which is this spiritual malady, right? And so the way that I kind of look at this, what I learned about myself, is that there's kind of this three-tier problem that I have. And I kind of look at it as a cascading problem. So up at the top, I've got this spiritual malady, right? I am separate. I am disconnected. I am not plugged in. I have no power in my life. And what that shows up as inside of me is I'm not okay. There's this not okayness that travels with me everywhere. And so that kind of overflows, think about a fountain, into mental obsession, which is my mind kicks in and says, I know how you can feel better. Just take a drink. It'll be great. It's not gonna, that bad stuff that happened last time, it's not gonna happen this time. And then that overflows, and I give into it at some point, and back into physical allergy, where I put one in and then I just get hungry, and I just want more and more. I want it every day. I want it when I wake up in the morning. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't know any normies that wake up in the morning hungry for booze. I do. It's forget about Wheaties. Give me a cup of vodka. And I think what I also didn't realize is that if you look at like the crazy stuff that I did when I was drinking, right? It doesn't really, it kind of pales in comparison to what would always happen, which is I take the first one again and again and again, therefore keeping me in this terrible cycle. And so it's like, okay, yeah, I could tell you crazy stories. Like I used to drive every morning to work rumble strip to rumble strip on the turnpike. And I don't know who was driving during those periods of time, but it would literally, you know, get to the one side, wake up, and then right back out, or to the other side, wake up. You know, one time when I was drinking, I decided to eat mushrooms, and I threw up all over myself, stripped down naked, walked off the edge of an unfinished deck, crashed headfirst into the ground, went unconscious for a while, and then once I woke up, decided to walk off into the woods about a mile to a beach on the side of the road, and then passed out on the beach like this. And my friends found me in the morning unconscious and had to load me into the back of a Jeep. You know, like, luckily for me, there weren't any hungry seagulls that morning. So, you know, like, I can go on and on stories like that, right? Like, we've all got crazy stories that happened to us while we were drinking, right? But when I look at the stuff that I did completely unintoxicated during those periods, you know, during that period of time, I mean, I'm walking around parking lots, not intoxicated whatsoever, just picking up cigarettes off the ground, collecting my cigarettes for the day, because that's how I get my cigarettes for the day. I would go to the smoker's pull at Quick Check and lift the top off and grab a fistful, and those would be my cigarettes for the day. I was recycling mouth tobacco. I had a really bad untreated skin condition, so I looked like a zombie, you know, which is appropriate, right? Because essentially what I looked like drinking was a zombie, you know, like alive but not living. Right? Can anybody relate to that? You know, Captain Autopilot, I just do the same thing every single day. I'm living only to drink, essentially. You know, I was a comfort-seeking missile. You know, anything that could give me comfort, that could give me some sense of okayness, I would chase to the end of the earth. And that was the only reason why I existed. You know, and if you talk about the 12 steps and how the goal is having a spiritual awakening, right? What's the opposite of a spiritual awakening? Spiritually asleep, right? It's as if, you know, you look at my soul is, you know, my spirit is running a convenience store, you know, and there's a sign on the door that says back in 15 minutes, and it's been there for 4 years, right? That's how I was operating. And I didn't know this. I didn't know any of this. All I knew is that I just loved alcohol and I wanted to do it all day, every day. I didn't know why I could never stop, but I just had kind of came to the conclusion that I was going to die that way. I had a conversation with my mom at one point where I said to her, I said, listen, I said, you know, Uncle Peter, you know, Uncle Mike, you know how Uncle Peter died in that, and Uncle Mike is going to die an alcoholic. I said, I think whatever that is, I've got it. And I think that this is just how my life is going to go. So if you could just stop worrying about me, I think that you could go off and maybe enjoy your life, because I don't think that this is ever going to change. I think that this is just how my life is going to go, and at some point I'm going to die, and I'm going to die an alcoholic. So I knew that this wasn't going away, but I didn't really know, number one, what the problem was exactly, and I didn't know for sure that there was a solution. And so, you know, my sponsor started taking me through the steps, and I started to learn a lot about this physical allergy, about the mental obsession, the subtle insanity that precedes the first drink, about the spiritual malady, right? Because one of the things is, I learned that there's no other solution other than to have a spiritual awakening. But then the next thing I learned is that I can't have one. Why? Because I am blocked by selfishness and self-centeredness. Now, I don't think any of us came into the rooms saying, hey, you know, I'm Tim, I've got real big problems with selfishness and self-centeredness. You know, like, But that turns out to be, it says in the book, above all else, I must be rid of this. This selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. And so I can't have a spiritual awakening because I am so selfish and self-centered, and because I have so much stuff blocking me from having that experience. And so I go through the step work to have these things removed, these blockages, right? And so you look at selfishness, self-centeredness, right? We get into the fourth step, resentment, fear, poor relationship conduct, guilt, shame, remorse, character defects, busyness of mind, right? Conscious separation. All of these things separate me from the power that can bring me back to life, that can give me that spiritual awakening, right? So what I learned is that I had to go through a process to remove those blockages. Now, I didn't really understand what that meant. They kept telling me it's a process of removal, not addition. I didn't really understand what that meant. And so I had this experience where I had just gotten out of treatment. I was in an inpatient for 14 days, and then I went to this place called RC, Recovery Center, for about 3.5 months. And then I got my sponsor while I was in there, and then I was moving into an Oxford house. And so I got started on my fourth step, and my sponsor tells me, about this process of removal, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and do the work, and I'm sure I'll get it later. And so he was like, well, in the meantime, you're not working, I know you're looking for a job, but in the meantime, why don't you do some volunteer work as well? And so I was like, okay, cool, I'd never done that before. And so I went to a church that was nearby, and I just showed up, and I was like, hey, I really want, I'm kind of new to the area, I want to do some volunteer work, is there anything you guys could, have me do? And she was like, well, let me get back to you. And so she called me, I think it was like the next day or day after that, and so she's like, hey, can you do gardening? And I was like, yeah, sure. I'd never gardened a day in my life, but I'm like, yeah, I'm sure I could figure it out. She's like, okay, we have this garden bed out front that hasn't been taken care of in years. And so what we want you to do is to come here and just basically remove all the stuff that's in there, and then we're going to have you, give you some money to get some seeds and stuff, and you can plant some flowers. I'm like, okay, sounds great. So I show up, and she wasn't exaggerating. This thing had about this much, it was about like a foot and a half deep of just this dead overgrowth of stuff that had grown up over the years and then died, and then grown up and died. And so a lot of this stuff was still rooted, so I had to go through and rip this stuff out by the roots. And it was a pretty big garden bed, so this took all day. I got there at 9 in the morning, I didn't leave till like 5 or 6. And by the time I was done, I had filled like 10 garbage bags full of this stuff. And once I got down to the bottom, it was really gross. It was like all these like gross like wet cigarette butts and gum and food, just all this really gross stuff. But I had gotten it all out to the point where when I left at the end of the day, there was nothing but soil. And so I left at the end of the day, they were already gone for the day. I was like, okay, I'll come back in a few days and I'll plant some stuff. The next day I got a call for a job interview, and I got the job, and so I was so excited about that I completely forgot about this garden. And so I remember I was driving home on the parkway, and I was like, you know what? All of a sudden it hit me. I was like, I never went back there to go and plant the flowers. I was like, let me stop by, it's on my way home. So I pull in and I walk up front, and the garden bed is just filled from end to end with beautiful flowers. Absolutely beautiful. And so I felt disappointed. I was like, oh man, they had somebody else come in and finish the job. I was like, let me go inside and talk to them and apologize. And so I walk in, I start talking to her. I was like, hey, the garden looks incredible. I said, whoever you had come in and do that, they did an incredible job. She goes, actually, we didn't have anybody come and do anything. She was like, all you had to do was clear out the junk, and the flowers grew up on their own. And I got it. I understood what my sponsor was talking about. I have all this stuff inside of me. Like Bill talks about how he had this spiritual experience soon blotted out by worldly clamors. Mostly those inside of me. So I learned that I have all this stuff inside of me that's blocking me from being able to live a spiritual life, from being connected to a higher power, from being able to receive that power and live a successful life on a spiritual basis. And so at that, like after that experience, I was like, okay, let's go. I'm ready. Let's get this junk out of here. And when we got into my resentments, I think I learned a lot about why life had been so unsatisfactory. You know, in every situation, with every relationship, was always the victim, you know, and I just couldn't see things in a sane way, you know. And one of the things I learned about a resentment is that it's essentially just holding on to anger toward a person or toward an institution, and so what that is kind of looks like is, it's like, imagine I'm holding a spear. Okay, a spear is a weapon that's designed to create distance between you and me. It's designed to create separation. It gives me power, and it makes me right and you wrong. And so I don't want to let go of that spear. And so, because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what happens if I let go of that. I'm afraid that I'm not going to get what I want. I'm afraid that you're not going to learn your lesson. So I hold on to it. And I don't just have one of those. I've got 50 or 70 of those, sometimes more. And so I learned that, you know, it talks about, you know, we realized that people were perhaps spiritually sick, right? How do I show up when I'm spiritually sick? Not good, right? I know that. We all know that from our own experiences, right? That when we're not doing well, we don't show up very well, right? We cause a lot of harm. We cause a lot of heartache. We cause a lot of headache for people, right? And so being able to look at this other person and seeing that, wow, you know, maybe they're going through something. Maybe they're going through something similar to what I was going through. You know, it might not be alcoholism, but we're not unique that we're the only ones that have problems. We're the only ones that have struggles. We're the only ones that have a hard time in life, right? Lots of people are. And so what made me be able to show up in a better way, right? I was given the gift of a whole lot of grace and the gift of this program, which allowed me to get unlocked. Not everybody has that, right? And now people have, you know, normies have their own ways of dealing with things, and it'll amaze you sometimes when you watch their own process, how they can deal with things on their own without this program, right? So doesn't mean that everybody needs to have this, but I think we're especially lucky to have this. You know, when I tell people that I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic, I'm not just grateful that I'm recovered. I am grateful that I am an alcoholic. Because all of the good things that I have in my life, you know, this spiritual life, the spiritual awakening, you know, this community, the fellowship, my beautiful, wonderful fiance, you know, my jobs, you know, I work for Oxford House now, which does, you know, recovery housing. I wouldn't have any of this stuff if it wasn't for me being an alcoholic. But most of all, I wouldn't have this program that allows me to be okay on the inside, regardless of whatever's happening on the outside, right? And that, I think, is the greatest gift of all. Like when you say a life beyond your wildest dreams, I didn't think that I could just be okay on the inside without drinking. I didn't think that that was possible. That's why I told my mom, I think I'm just going to die this way. That was my medicine. That was my only solution to feeling this way. And so if I'm given this gift of getting better, and then I'm able to show up better and not cause so much harm, not piss people off all the time, right? What should I want for this person that is struggling, that's disturbing me, right? The same thing. I want for them to have all the same good things that I have, right? And if they did, they might not do those same things, right? And so what I love about the fourth step, and especially the resentment inventory, is that it kind of tricks us into forgiving people, right? It never mentions the word forgiveness, but we go through this process and this realization in the inventory process where we kind of forgive them as a byproduct, right? Because I think if we went straight at the problem and said, okay, you need to forgive this guy, we'd be like, nah, screw that. You know, we're not going to do that. But, you know, we go through this process where we look inward, we look at how we're perceiving the situation, we look at this other person, we realize that we've actually caused a ton of harm to this person in advance of them showing up in any kind of way. You know, it says we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate, right? And so, you know, we go into the fear inventory, you know, the sex inventory. You know, I won't go super into those, but one of the things I did want to talk about is that I think that I've learned that my satisfaction of living is largely dependent on 6 and 7 and 10. You know, at this point in my sobriety, you know, early on I needed to make my amends, you know, and I went at it and I made every single one of my amends. Okay, I think it's so important, and I always tell people, you know, if you're not current on your amends, if you haven't made them all, like that's okay. You know, this isn't a judgment, but like there's something really magical that happens when you're able to get completely free. When you've made every single amends, when you don't owe anybody anything, when you are right with the world. And I was able to go through that process. But, you know, I'm 11 years sober now. And there's a lot more that happens in life than just not drinking, right? And so in 6 and 7, I really started to see that all of my character defects were very similar to my drinking. In other words, I keep doing these things that are causing me and others harm because I'm getting something out of it. Right? Every single one of my character defects, it's doing something for me. Because if I wasn't, then why would I keep doing it? Right? It's giving me something that I want. And that's why I'm not willing to let go of the behavior, the thinking, the belief, whatever it is. I'm not willing to let go of it because it's doing something for me. Same reason why I wasn't willing to let go of my drinking. Right? Like, I'm burning my life down and causing all this harm and all this havoc, and I keep doing it every single day. Why? Because I'm getting something out of it that I want. Like I said, that was my solution. So it turns out that in sobriety, I've got a lot of other not great solutions to the circumstances and situations in my life. And so that's kind of how all my behaviors and my character defects come into light, is that it's some way for me to handle something. Right? And so, you know, for me, like, I don't know about anybody else in here, but like, I put down the drink and I picked up the cheeseburger. You know what I mean? Like, I put down the drink and picked up the pint of Ben & Jerry's, you know? And in my first year of sobriety, I'd already gained back the normal amount of weight in treatment. I had gone from like 160 to like 185. And then in my first year of just being able to do whatever I want, eat whatever I want, I went from 185 to 250 in 7 months. I went on the Super Size Me diet and ate nothing but McDonald's 2 or 3 meals a day for 7 months. And I gained 65 pounds. And yes, I still have the stretch marks to prove it. Now, the question is like, well, you know, why am I doing that? You know, like this is causing problems. It's like my clothes are tight, they don't fit me, my buttons are popping off, I feel terrible. Like, why do I keep doing this? It seems obvious that I would want to let it go. Well, I mean, when you eat a double quarter pounder with cheese, large fries, and a large sweet tea from McDonald's, I mean, it's almost as good as getting drunk. You know, I would do that and go back, you know, eat it at my Oxford house and then just kind of like pass out in a food coma on the couch. I'm like, this is great. You know, so I would just do that every day, you know, and I continued to do that up until the point that I made amends to my parents, and then all of a sudden it just went away. And it's like, well, how did that happen? You know, there's no direct correlation. It's not like my parents used to like force feed me or something, and that somehow, you know what I mean? Like a lot of times we experience this like non-correlated, non-direct growth, where I do something over here and then some character defect over here just falls away. And so I made amends to my parents, and then all of a sudden I just lost interest in eating McDonald's overnight. And all of a sudden I had motivation to go to the gym overnight, right? And so I don't think that we get to decide which character defects stay or which ones go, but I think that where we are participants in the process is that I need to do the work that I can do to prepare the soil spiritually, right? Like a farmer doesn't grow a plant, right? The farmer prepares the soil, plants a seed, and then God grows the plant, right? Like he can't do anything. There's no spell that he's going to cast that's going to make the plant come up out of the ground, right? Like he prepares the soil, and then the plant grows on its own. And I think that that's largely how character defects work is, I need to do the work to prepare the soil spiritually, and then God does the rest, And so a lot of times, I'm doing these things on a consistent basis, and sometimes I'm asleep to it, sometimes I'm not, but I just can't stop doing it. Same way as I couldn't stop drinking. And I would look at it sometimes having some awareness with my sponsor and say, okay, I can see clearly what I'm getting out of this. I am buying stuff nonstop on Amazon because it's like Christmas every day, right? I went through this period of time at work where I was just chain chewing gum all day, every day. And what started to happen is that I would always chew on the right side, and I started getting these sores on like the inside of my cheek from chewing on that side all the time. So what did I do, as any good alcoholic would do? I started chewing on the left side. And then so I started chewing on the left side, and then I got sores on both sides of my mouth, right? And I'm like, you know what? Like this mint gum is really burning the sores on the inside of my mouth. I think I'm going to switch to fruit gum, right? So I switched to fruit gum, and it's a little bit better, but it soon gets to the point where I can't even eat food without being in a terrible amount of pain. And so I called my sponsor, and I was like, I got to tell you something. I said, I think I'm addicted to chewing gum. And he was like, well, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, I can't stop doing it, and I got these sores on my inside my mouth, and I'm still chain chewing gum all day. And so he's like, well, why are you chewing all this gum? And I was like, I don't know, it kind of chills me out. I'm sitting in front of a computer all day, it's something to do, it kind of gives me a sense of ease and comfort. And so he was like, okay, well, this is the same thing as you're drinking, right? Like you're drinking to get that sense of ease and comfort, you're doing the same thing with this, right? Same thing you're doing with the McDonald's, same thing you're doing with online shopping, right? And so he was like, the solution's the same, right? Surrender and prayer, right? Like I'm gonna turn myself over to my higher power, to God, and I'm gonna say a prayer. I'm gonna say, God, like I can't stop doing this, and I need help. And so one day at a time, I didn't go to the convenience store in the morning and buy gum. And that went on for a few weeks, the sores healed, and the problem was removed, right? But I've had so many of these experiences in sobriety that I can see that my problem didn't really start or end with alcohol. It's an inside problem that I'm trying to treat with other things, and to me, like the best thing that I had ever found to treat it was alcohol. So that's why that was the main event for such a long time. But now God has removed my biggest character defect, which is drinking, and I immediately turn my attention to what else I can get something out of, right? And so think about it this way, like, it starts out and I am the CEO of the entire universe. If there's something going off on some far off place that I don't agree with, they're going to know about it, right? But, we have some ego deflation, we really get smashed down in our alcoholism. And so it's like, okay, well now I'm the CEO of Tim Corp, right? I've shrunk the scope of my domain, my territory. So I'm the CEO of Tim Corp. So it's like I just turned over control to God of the alcohol division. And I immediately turned my attention to the food division, the online dating division, the Amazon division. Let's get the food division cranking out Big Macs. Let's get on Amazon. I want packages showing up every day. Let's get on the dating apps, and I want to start meeting girls, and so it's like I start to turn my attention to all these other areas of my life. So it's like, thank you so much, God, for taking over control of the alcohol division, but I got it from here. I'll run the other divisions. Don't worry about it. I got this, right? And the reason why I want those divisions under my control is because of what they're going to produce for me, right? They're going to produce ease and comfort. They're going to produce excitement. They're going to produce these things that I'm seeking because I still have this sense of not okayness, and any territory that I have, any territory that I claim just separates me from God. It puts me over here and him over here. And everything in the middle is everything that I think I should have control over, everything I think I should be in charge of, everything that's mine. And so I think that what's been cool for me is to see my territory shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink and shrink, and I'm just getting closer and closer to God over time. And I think that's what it talks about. Like this is a process, separates the men from the boys and the women from the girls. In other words, like, these things might not be as objectionable or crazy or harmful to us as our drinking, so it's like we kind of put them in a different category. It's like, well, I'm not losing everything because of the online shopping from Amazon. I mean, I have no savings, I can't, I'm living paycheck to paycheck when I don't need to be, but yeah, it's not that bad. It's like I've gained 65 pounds and my clothes barely fit, but it's not that bad. And what I realize is that, like, I have to decide for myself that I'm going to make getting close to God a very high priority. Way up there, right? Because for me, the automatic of what's at the top of my priority list is what I want. And the thing that's tough about character defects is that I have to prioritize getting close to God over what I want. And I don't want to do that because I think if I do, I'm not going to get what I want. Right? If I put, the spiritual life, if I put getting close to God up at the top, well, I might not get all these things that I want. I'm a wanting machine. I don't know if anybody else can identify with that, but there is no limit to the amount of stuff that I could want. I've got a million preferences and a million things that I want at all times, and it's like I'm just, gimme, and it could be, and doesn't necessarily mean like physical objects, it could be like, I want people to like me. I want a certain kind of relationship. I want, a certain kind of situation at work. It goes on and on and on, but I'm a wanting machine. And so that's what's so hard. It's like, well, who wants to not get what they want? Right? It doesn't even make sense. Everybody wants to get what they want. And so that's why it's so difficult to kind of deprioritize that. But it tells us that in the promises, right? What does it say? It says, we will lose interest in selfish things and we will gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away, right? So by going through this process, this stuff kind of happens automatically. This magic starts to happen for us without us doing it. It's like, I'm not doing this stuff. I'm participating in the process and God is doing the rest. And so, I think that for me to try to remain undisturbed, right? Like in step 10, it talks about how, we've entered the world of the Spirit, right? And there's totally different ground rules in the world of the Spirit. So in the world of the material, my go-to is I need to be in charge, I need to be in control, I need to make things happen, I need to go out and get what I want, or I'm not going to be okay, right? In the spiritual world, we're no longer the director of the show, right? Like, we have a new director, we have somebody else that is running the show that we're going to say, okay, whatever you provide for me is what I'm meant to have right now. And that's hard sometimes because it's not always something that I want. God has been throwing my way a lot of spiritual growth. And what that looks like for me is a lot of circumstantial difficulties, a lot of stuff that I'm really struggling with. And I've been going through a period of time where, there was, about a year and a half, 2 years where I felt like I was almost floating, feeling like I was really in the world of the Spirit. And the last few months, I almost feel like I've been like ripped out of it, and I'm kind of like in this funk. I'm not showing up as good as I want to show up. I'm spoiled, it's like I kind of got to this point where everything was kind of going my way for so long that all of a sudden stuff started not going my way and I'm like throwing a temper tantrum about it. I'm like fighting with people again, and that's not what it promises me in step 10. It says we stop, fighting anything or anyone, right? we start to be in harmony with God, the world, and the people about us. And I'll tell you what, I haven't been as in harmony as I would like to be. You know, and I think a lot of people would tell you, oh, what are you talking about? Tim's great. Well, guess what? Like, I know the experience that I'm having on the inside, and it might not always show up externally because I'm kind of like a quiet guy. I don't externalize a lot of things, but I can tell you that my experience has been that I've been disturbed a lot. And it's been a lot harder for me to practice step 10 because I'm actually having to do step 10. You know, it's easy to, you know, continue to take personal inventory and have this in-the-moment awareness where I am able to kind of operate in the world of the spirit on a consistent basis, you know, when things are going my way. When things aren't going my way, it's like, now I actually have to work step 10, you know? And so with step 10, it's kind of like this game where it's like, okay, the person that's least disturbed at the end of the day wins, right? So it's about how do I remain undisturbed throughout the day, you know? So it's like so-and-so, you know, insults me or whatever, and I'm all mad, and I call my sponsor, you know. And so it gives us these clear-cut instructions where it says, okay, you know, we ask God to remove it, we speak to somebody at once, we make any amends if necessary, and then we turn our attention to someone we can help, right? And so if I follow those directions with these disturbances that come up, you know, you think about like the Force in Star Wars, right? There's a disturbance in the Force, and it's inside of me, right? And so it's like as these disturbances come up, usually what my go-to is I scan my environment for what's causing the disturbance, and I lock onto it, and then I try to change or fix or alter that person or that situation, or whatever I think is causing the disturbance. I try to treat it externally, and it never works, right? Because what happens? I step on the toes of my fellows. I cause more harm, right? And so, you know, I've had to learn that I want all kinds of things all the time. It's just what my mind does. But what I really want is peace. That's what I really want. All these things that I'm after, I think are going to give me peace, are going to give me ease and comfort, right? That's what I really want. And what I've learned is that it's not through these external things and trying to fix, manage, and control my environment that gives me that peace. In fact, it does the opposite, right? I can get undisturbed internally without anything externally changing. You know, it says in the 12 and 12, it's a spiritual axiom that if I'm disturbed, no matter what the cause, there is something the matter with me, right? Now, sometimes that can be pretty clear cut, but sometimes it's kind of hard. Well, what's the matter with me? Well, you're disturbed. Oh, okay. Do you want to stay disturbed? No. Okay, well, let's take the spiritual instructions and get undisturbed, right? And so I can have that process happen completely inside of me without anything external changing. And so the reason why I'm talking about some of this stuff is because, you know, I mentioned in the beginning that we need to have a spiritual awakening. We have all this stuff that's blocking us, right? So we talked about, you know, resentment, fear, you know, sex conduct, you know, poor relationship conduct, you know, character defects, right? All that stuff blocks me. We talked about guilt, shame, and remorse. All that blocks me, and that's addressed in 8 and 9, right? And then in 10, literally any disturbance that comes up inside of me will block me. And so it's like, okay, well, let's keep those blockages clear. Let's keep clearing them out from inside of me. And then step 11, prayer and meditation, to increase our conscious contact. So I also learned that I have this busyness of mind that blocks me. I don't know about you guys, but I wake up in the morning and my mind just going, blah, 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 you know, like, and that is another thing that really blocks me. It's hard for me to be here, right? It's really difficult for me to be present. It's really difficult for me to be surrendered because I got the committee, I've got this noise in my head, right? And so in the big book it says, if God is everything or God is nothing, what's our choice to be? If God is everything, then God is literally everything. Everything you see, this room, all the people in this room, the entire universe, all God, right? And so if everything is God, then God is what's happening right here, right now. God isn't what's happening 5 minutes ago or 2 days ago, and God's not what's happening a week from now. God is what's happening right here, right now. Right? So if I want to have conscious contact then I also need to be right here, right now. If I'm off somewhere else, if I'm off with my busyness in mind, if I'm blocked by any of these things, I am not right here, right now. I can't be in the moment, I can't be with you, I can't be present to anything. And if I'm not there, then what am I trying to do? I'm trying to fix, manage, and control everything to try to make it the way that I think it needs to be okay. Is this, you guys like follow me here? Like, and so, I'm a peace junkie. I love peace. And so why I love the steps is because they are all designed to remove these blockages from peace, from being here and now, from having conscious contact, from receiving that power, right? Because that's where I want to be. That is like the best place, you know, and for anybody in here that has had a spiritual experience, had a spiritual awakening, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know, we want to try to live in that spiritual awakening every single day. And so, one of the things that I think I talk about a lot, especially with sponsees, is that I think we talk about how powerlessness is like the problem, right? You know, it says in the big book, lack of power, that is our dilemma. To me, powerlessness is the point. And what I mean by that is this. In step 3, it talks about how I try to fix, manage, and control the world around me to make it the way that I think it needs to be. And I'm always in conflict and collision with everybody and everything because I'm doing that, right? So if I can presence powerlessness in everything that I do, I am a lot more likely to keep my hands off of the knobs and the levers and trying to fix, manage, and control everything, right? If I can be in a surrendered state, if I can presence that powerlessness in my day-to-day life, then again, I won't be trying to fix, manage, and control. And the last thing is, I think that when I talk about God, when I talk about this to newcomers, they have kind of the same reaction and experience that I did, which is like, hey, you know, at least for me, I was like a very science-oriented person. Okay, I was very scientific. Growing up, I wasn't really introduced to any kind of religion. My parents just told me like, hey, you know, we trust that you'll find your own thing. So I didn't really have any preconceptions coming in, which was good. But I also was very science-based, and I didn't really understand this whole God thing. And so one of the things I'll tell my sponsees is this. It's like, okay, so you consider yourself a scientific person. Okay, so one of the foundational pieces of science is this. You form a hypothesis, you perform an experiment that'll either prove or disprove that hypothesis, and then you get your results. But it doesn't become science yet. What happens is scientists from around the world will try to reproduce that experiment to see if they take the same steps, if they get the same results, right? The experiment of the 12 steps has been reproduced hundreds of millions of times all over the planet. They take the exact same 12 steps and they get the exact same results, which is a spiritual awakening, a personal transformation, a way of living that is so satisfying that I never feel the need to return to alcohol ever again. What you guys have given me is the ability to have this sense of okayness that travels with me no matter where I go. No matter what's going on outside, I've got this sense of okayness that travels with me, this sense of peace. And I just can't thank you enough for what you've all given me. Thank you.
Okay, incredible stuff. I think I speak for everybody when I say thank you to Tim and to his fiancée for braving the elements, risking certain death, driving through a tornado, to come here tonight and deliver an incredible message of hope and recovery to our group here. right up against it, so we'll get out of here. Again, the food and the fellowship for this group starts at 8 o'clock. Feel free to show up early. If you want to hang out, get involved with this meeting, get involved with some service. We could always use some help, a lot of moving parts. If you want to help out with some services work right now, there's a meeting after the meeting. Feel free to hang out. If you want to help us put away some of the chairs, we probably have to put away all these chairs that are out on the floor and along the sides. The one at the tables will stay back there where they are. It's customary for us to thank our speakers. They come here on their own time and expense, so we usually form a line in the front here and thank our speakers personally. Thank you to everybody that helped to set up the meeting. Thank you to our readers. Thank you to Ed in the back for taking care of the kitchen. But most importantly, thank you to our speaker, Tim. And if you do care to join us, we have a nice way of closing.